Hello again. It's great to see so many of you dropping onto the gamification leaderboard. If you haven't done so far, make sure you do. On to our third panel of the day now, upgrading networks and infrastructure. With some successful digital transformation projects rolled out, the public sector still has a lot of catching up to do. Transitioning legacy systems to digital has been costly or cost prohibiting. Mission 4 of the Transforming for a Digital Future 2022 to 2025 Roadmap for Digital and Data, it's a catchy title, that one, requests all departments agree to promote a buy once, use many times approach to technology, including making use of a common code, pattern, and architecture repository for government. Will this approach help overcome the cost prohibition? It's clear the recent rise in inflation will reduce budget capacity across local authorities and other departments, but should that be the excuse for not delivering services the public deserves? Upgrading existing infrastructure and networks allows sector organisations to become more effective, efficient, and more resilient for its citizens, offering a way to harness the latest technologies to gain maximum value and create resilience and sustainability. What do sector leaders need to consider when navigating infrastructure upgrades, and where do they start to ensure an agile yet more secure transformation? In this panel discussion, we hear from leaders on how upgrading networks and infrastructure underpins the success of digital transformation. So I'm delighted to introduce you to Cam Patel, Senior Director of Public Sector UK, ServiceNow, Kurt Frary, Deputy Director of IMT, CTO Norfolk County Council, and Socketem Vice President, and Stacey McCady, Digital Connectivity Lead at South London Partnership. Now, don't forget, do keep using the live Q&A function, and I'll include as many questions as possible once we get going. So this is the moment of truth when I put the glasses on and then I see if I've got a full house, and I have got a full house. So welcome to Stacey, Kurt, and Cam. Cam, start us off, if you would, by telling us a bit about ServiceNow and what you do.
Yeah, morning, everyone. So ServiceNow has been around for about 10 years now as a workflow organization. So what does that really mean to everyone? So our heritage has been started around service desks and ticketing, which we're probably well known for. But that's over the years expanded to how we help organizations really automate those workflows and tasks and really help the acceleration of digital transformation in organizations.
Fantastic. Stacey, you're the Digital Connectivity Lead at South London Partnership. I don't know a lot about the South London Partnership. Tell us a bit about what your role involves and what the partnership does.
Yep. So hi, morning everyone. Like Helen said, I'm Stacey from SLP. There are 4 of me across London. So there's myself at SLP. We have someone similar in West London, someone in Central London, and someone over in East London. We work with our sub-regional group to bridge the relationships between the operators, the providers, and the councils. So we work directly with economic development, we work with the digital team, we work with sustainability, and we work right across to make sure that any digital transformation within the councils or for the residents and businesses is maximised by looking at various procurement routes.
Fantastic. And Kurt, you deliver the operational ICT service for more than 7,500 staff at Norfolk Council and for Norfolk Fire and Rescue. So it sounds like you've got a massive job there on your hands. Tell us a bit about your role, and I know you do other things as well, but that's a starter.
Yes, yeah, I wear many hats, and good morning, everyone. I wear many hats. It's quite a fun role. So yeah, so it's the operational service for Norfolk County Council across the county of Norfolk. We also provide the IT for a borough council, Great Yarmouth Borough Council. And about a year and a half ago, I was on quite a steep learning curve, learning about the ICT for Norfolk Fire and Rescue. So that's my day job. But in the background also, Vice President, recently appointed Vice President for Socketem, Society for Innovation, Transformation and Modernisation. And that gives me a great opportunity to get involved with some new stuff, new tech, working out what we're doing with data and joining things up and sharing it across the public sector. So that's quite fun to do. But my ambition really is to make Norfolk the best connected rural county in the UK, because the networks are the foundation for all that digital stuff that we're trying to do.
Well, I know you probably have some challenges in Norfolk as well, because so much of the county is rural and perhaps connectivity is not as easy. But Kurt, I gather that you are leading a groundbreaking innovation network, which is the largest free-to-use public sector IoT network in the UK. Tell us a little bit about that first, if you would.
Yeah, so in simple terms, for the audience benefit, it's all about sensors, things that you can monitor things with, usually referred to as Internet of Things devices, something that can read something. So you can monitor the roads, you can monitor the air temperature. But to enable you to get the information from those points that provide data, you need a network. There's many types of network, but an IoT network allows you to send small bits of data a very long way. So you can put a sensor 25 miles away. It could be counting traffic, for instance, and that could send that information all the way back to the internet, back to your dashboard, so you can make sense of that data. Now, we embarked on this a couple of years ago, looking at the technology, because it was used in Europe quite widely, but not very widely in the UK. And we've moved from going from a grant-funded local enterprise partnership grant to delivering this massive network. And our ambition is to cover all of Norfolk and Suffolk, and we're nearly there. And it's making a big difference. We've got businesses using it, we've got people using it, people learning about the technology. But the thing for public sector is that actually we can get more data points, which means we can make better decisions when we overlay them on top of each other. So it's just one innovation that's quite exciting in Norfolk.
Fantastic. Cam, one of the key challenges that the public sector face in digital transformation is the cost of upgrading legacy systems. Is that a real barrier, or is there a way of getting over that?
Yeah, it's a great question. The challenge all organizations, not just public sector, have is that over the years, everyone has aspired to best in breed technologies. And with the technology revolution over the last 20 or 30 years, there's been massive advances in ways of doing that by the use of technologies. But what's happened in that is that typically they're best in breed for that particular task or solution. And then over the years, businesses got more complex. There's more collaboration. There's more interdependencies. If you look at public sector departments, organizations don't work in solo. It's really important they cross collaborate. And then with having best in breed solutions, you're then stuck in a relative technology silo, because the only way out of that is by having either a very expensive upgrade to the system or a kind of complete transformation out of that. What's enabled that over the recent years has been the advance of cloud and SaaS as a way out of that. So the notion of good is good enough, taking something and not customizing that to reach that last 10% of what your requirements are has really advanced this cross collaboration. So it's a challenge, because what all organizations don't want to do is pay for legacy upgrades, which are costly and complex, with very little return from that. So cloud and SaaS is a way through that. But and again, this is the direction of travel. Someone described it as we're at a point where we've been trying to build a Formula One car with different car components, and we're not sure what the outcome will be of that component. So that's the challenge that we potentially are facing.
Later this afternoon, we do have a whole debate on cloud, actually. But Stacey, I just wondered if you can add there. I mean, you're bridging those relationships between councils, providers, and operators. Mm-hmm. What kind of challenges have you seen as far as upgrading legacy systems go?
Well, I'm definitely not as technical as Cam is there, so I probably won't be able to go in depth. But I suppose it's really different for what I do, because I work to help drive the council's costs down. So we look at things like anchor tenancy models. So by centralising their buying power, by putting in their CCTV, their corporate wide area network, how can that drive further investment in for the borough? So working with some of the London councils that I've got right now, they look at their regeneration areas, they look at their not spots, low connectivity. How can we use an anchor tenancy model based on a council's corporate wide area network to really drive investment? So changing from a 5-year OPEX deal to a 20-year open access dark fibre deal, where the council can really realise those cost savings over the next decade or two, to to really cutting their costs, and then they can repurpose their IT spend into more innovative solutions, all the technical good stuff that Cam and Kurt probably work with on a day-to-day basis that I don't understand, but it's helping councils realise that there's different ways to procure their networks, but also look at the economic development of the borough and really help look at digital inclusion and to help that.
I love it when you talk about dark fibre. It's definitely above my pay grade. Do you have any examples, Stacey, or an example, obviously, without mentioning names, but that you could use to illustrate that?
Yeah, I mean, the various ones, I'm sure you can tell by my accent, although I work in London, I didn't start there. So I worked with City Fibre in Scotland. So looking at the Gigabit Glasgow, Gigabit Edinburgh deal, so really helping to anchor those investment pieces from Greg Mesh by looking at the council corporate networks and looking at the whole digital transformation piece. So not just putting fibre into council areas, but also putting it into schools, secondary schools, resilient network rings around the borough, breakout parts, looking at business parks, and it really helps to transform the whole region into just, the main sort of urban spots being connected, but the rural areas, because I'm sure you'll know probably parts of Scotland have get real sort of metropolitan urban parts and then real grass verges going out to to the back ends of rural farms. So it's really been able to make sure we don't leave anyone behind, and that's one of the key priorities that I work with. So we're funded directly from the GLA via Sadiq Khan's business rates. We've been put in on a 2-year post, each of us, and it's to help drive that, is to make sure that there's digital access for all in London and that no one's left behind, whether that be from a fibre to a home premise or whether people who consume data on mobile, that they have access to the future technologies of 5G and looking at small cell solutions.
Funnily enough, one of the best areas of connectivity I've experienced was the Isle of Harris, where you're more likely to bump into a sheep or a cow crossing the road. But it was incredible considering how remote it is in the Outer Hebrides. Kurt, I haven't forgotten you. I'm coming back to you with examples in a minute, just warning you of agriculture and road gritting coming up for you. But Cam, can you give us an example of how the public sector can gain efficiency and also resilience for its users by really embracing digital transformation?
Yeah, so one of the challenges, if you look at employment, is public sector always competing with the enterprise and commercial space, and we're working with a number of organisations in the healthcare, but also in central government, where we're helping to automate the process of employees. So we've heard from some customers where onboarding can take up to 90 days from offer, which is just too long if you compare the agility that some commercial organizations have. So by automating that process, bringing that down into 3 or 4 days, you've got a better chance of competing and getting that workforce into the employment. Yeah, I fully agree with Stacey. The leveling up around digital and access to the digital economy, but also education and access to information is critical for public sector. So what we try to do at ServiceNow is really simplify the engagement, provide a digital, we call it a digital front door for a customer, but also for an employee experience, so that you've got that unified experience and really help automate the back office operations to make it more streamlined.
I imagine that's really key. Now, Kurt, I've been doing a bit of background reading from some links you sent me. And I always think that when we talk about digital transformation and data and things like that, it can feel not dry, but it comes to life with examples, doesn't it? And there were 2 examples that really stood out for me. The way you're helping farmers and agriculture with your innovation network, and your highways teams using intelligence tech to know when to grit. Just picking out those projects, I just wondered if you could just tell us a bit about them and how digital's helping.
Yeah, they're both 2 really, really good examples because they're live. We only talk about things we've actually done, so that's not an ambition. These are things that are happening. So for the last 2 winters, traditionally county councils, they monitor the temperature and then decide where to grit. And in Norfolk, we'd split the county into 6 broad areas. We'd look at the temperatures and then we'd send the gritting lorries out. And there's a certain path they follow to grit the roads effectively. And it's obviously for road safety, but also to just keep the highways clear so the traffic can move and all of those things. Now, when you split the county into 6 areas, traditionally we'd have 6 data points. So for one massive area, you'd have a data point that tells you what the temperature is. Now, we know that from research that some of our areas have microclimates and some will need grit and some won't. And there's also, depending on how much you grit, you know, there is a cost to that. The more you grit, the more it costs. And it takes longer to do. So we started trialing some of these sensors in some of the areas where we thought there may be a different temperature or a different climate. And that gave us instantly more data points. So if you think about the sensors that we used before were pretty industrial, probably cost £25,000 to £30,000 a time. We had 6 of those. These new sensors we put out are just over £150 plus the effort to fit them. We can have hundreds of them in different areas and monitor and get more data and only send the grit lorries where they need to go. So that we've been running and expanding each winter, and this winter we'll be expanding more, and we're getting more and more data all of the time. Now, to take that, you move to the other end of the spectrum where we've put this free network out there for public, businesses and personal people to, private individuals to use, and anyone can put a sensor on the network and use it for free. So one of our local commercial companies, an agri-tech company, has decided that they had a load of data, but they didn't know how to get it back to a dashboard. So they've jumped on our network, so they send their data from their sensors, not ours, across the network, and they put it onto a phone in a farmer's hands, and that tells them when to spray their crops. And there's quite a few examples, and they went from 0 to having this up and running in 6 weeks. So it's pretty amazing what they were showing these farmers. And then what they've started to do is follow us around as we've rolled out the network gateways or the masts. As we've gone around, they've approached more and more farmers to get them onto their services. So we've helped a commercial organisation as well. I suppose the other thing I'd like to say, though, is listening to the conversation, because this session is around upgrading networks and infrastructure. We mustn't forget that the world's changed quite a bit around this. You know, we've still got loads of people working from home. I'm sure Cam and Stacey has, and Cam has said, look, the world's moving more and more to cloud and SaaS. So that means we have to think about what networks we actually want, you know, because traditionally we've bought a network. This has been in a big circle across our county. It's run for 10 years with the supplier, but the technology's moved on. Yeah. And from our point of view, our strategy has been, well, we want to change. We want to buy a network which enables all this digital change and innovation, but also supports all of that new way of working. And it has changed considerably to the point where we've moved to an approach which is called zero trust, which is basically your laptop and your password is considered safe and secure, and you can work from anywhere, which means that as the byproduct is you don't need a traditional network, you just need a circuit. So if any of us can and some of us today are working from home, that means you trust the network and the person and the broadband connection. So why can't you just use that for government use? And we've changed our stance on that. Our strategy now is to put direct internet access circuits in, much like your broadband networks at home.
I'd be interested, Stacey, to know if you're sort of coming across that too. But also what strikes me, you know, when we're talking about digital change and innovation and inclusion, is that I think there was a statistic earlier on this morning that there are still 1.5 million people who aren't digitally connected, or iPads or phones. And you briefly touched on it, Stacey. How do we make sure that, you know, digital transformation changes lives to the better? Kurt and Cam are giving us some great examples, but how do we make sure that nobody's behind the curve and left out on this?
Yeah, I mean, it can be hard to try and track everyone, especially with the cost of living crisis, especially with rents and mortgages going up. People aren't signing up to the 12-month broadband packages that the likes of Hyperoptic and Community Fibre are doing, because they don't know where they're going to be living in 3 months, let alone 12 months. And quite frankly, it's been quite hard and challenging for people to sit and change gas and electricity and broadband providers every 6 months if they're moving about and about. It's a tough time for everyone. People will be falling into sort of mental illness and worry about how they're going to get their children's school uniforms washed, etc. So it can be quite hard to track that. So some of the stuff that we do is, I think, like I mentioned earlier, so I work with the digital teams on their social value side when they do their tenders. So making sure that we can leverage any either cash donations or whether it be free connections into socially deprived areas. LOTTE, the London Office of Technology and Innovation, are also effectively setting up the equivalent of a food bank. It's called a tech bank, where people donate, whether it can be residents donating or it can be businesses donating old laptops, old phones, old tablets, anything that they want, and they have professionals who completely redo everything in the background, and they hand them out to people who are most needing them, whether that be people with children, people who are looking for jobs at home, because that can really hinder everything. As a lot of the jobs, just as Kurt was saying, is we're working from home, we're hybrid working, but if people don't have the connectivity, it can be very challenging to apply for a job that has a hybrid working location. Some people are wanting to go back into an office because they can't afford the technology at home themselves, or they can't afford the connectivity. So it's getting to work with people who are needing it the most, and it can be quite challenging. And some people who you wouldn't necessarily think would go to the council for help, sometimes that can be that demographic that actually need it the most, who have never claimed benefits before, who have never seen themselves in this sort of poverty category, but now they are. And sometimes broadband and technology can be one of the first things to go. And this is what we're trying to explain to the, our partners at Hyperoptic and Community Fibre and Openreach is, yes, we have these deals of low cost, internet connectivity, and a lot of them come with that, and it's a no cancellation fee. So if you find yourselves out of money at the end of November, you can cancel and there's no early termination charges. But realistically, that's the least time when people want disconnected from the internet. So we're trying to work with them to get a package to keep them online even during the hard times. So it's
so important.
It's really important right now.
Yeah. Cam, has the pandemic, do you think, changed the way organisations should think about networks and infrastructure?
Yeah, absolutely. And to Kurt's point, the fact that they've moved to zero trust is a great example of that. When I first started in public sector, I remember I'd go to see government officials and they'd have 3 or 4 laptops each for each part of the government department they were working for. So and this was pre-wireless. So you can imagine how static that working environment was. So now moving forward, with the complexity that the pandemic brought, the change in people working from home, and just the change in landscape, where we now have an opportunity where you could be doing a job in London and be based anywhere in the UK. And some of that's been enabled by better networks and better technologies, and some of that's been driven by the pandemic and the changing requirements. But that definitely is not going to go away. I think what most organizations, public sector and commercial, will have to do is adapt how they treat and work with their employees to get the maximum out there. Speaking personally, can we move to a 100% remote environment? I personally don't like that, because I think there's a lot of just human interactions where you miss out of, and some IP which you miss out on virtual Zooms, right, as opposed to being in a room and whiteboarding. But definitely there'll be a change in requirements, and I think areas like 5G and to the stuff that Kurt's doing around IoT sensors, this will just be accelerated over the next kind of few years, and we'll see greater use of data, the connections, the sensors, all coming together to allow organizations to make better decisions. I think the art then is, what do you do with the information, and how do you automate the next set of tasks and actions so it's more automated and quicker to respond.
And Cam, we talk about the latest technology being used, but is there a concern that departments rush to use the latest technology without proper consideration of the infrastructure that it's hosted on?
Yeah, and it goes back to my point earlier. Everyone wants the shiny new stuff out there, and the challenge is if you look at the broader organization, will that fit into what's being required? And as I described earlier, where you look at the best of breed approach, where organizations were picking technologies which were right for.
Oh, I think we've lost you there, Cam. I think we've lost Cam's. I think he's frozen there. Kurt, just following on from what Cam was saying, will you just tell us a little bit more about zero trust? And I don't know, perhaps that's kind of new to me because I'm a general news journalist, and perhaps our audience are more familiar with it. But I was quite fascinated when you were talking about the fact you were using zero trust.
Yeah, so let me give you some context around it, because that'll probably help you and the audience. So the reality is of us working from home. We've over the last couple of years, a lot of our services have moved from on-site applications, line of business apps, to in the cloud. So an example of that is Office 365, using the Microsoft stuff in the cloud, and some of our line of business apps are software as a service, which means you just need an internet browser to access them. So that makes us think differently around networks and how we access them just generally. So if you're working from home, you've got your laptop like I am today. I'm using my broadband to access services. Now, some of my traffic, some of the stuff I request to access from my laptop goes straight to a site on the internet, and some of it goes back to County Hall in Norwich to access a line of business system. Now, because the world's changed, more and more of these apps, as they're being upgraded or replaced, are becoming cloud apps, which means we're more reliant on the internet as public sector and as a service, and providing services to our customers and the public. So that means, actually, logically, and the future looks like we're all going to be using everything on the internet mostly. So that means we need to change the way we think about the networks and the connectivity. Now, zero trust is a way of making sure we're safe and secure. We're sending data from my laptop at home to Microsoft, to line of business providers on the internet, and it gets there safely and securely, and we've got the relevant protection around that. But that does mean that zero trust really is a concept where you trust nothing except for the person, their password, and they've got a valid device, and they're logging in from a valid country. But the other things that come out of that as a byproduct are, it reduces complexity. So rather than have a network where you've got to change lots of bits and lots of components, actually all you need is an internet connection. So I could lift my laptop, walk down to Costa down the road, log in, and I'm still safe and secure and doing the same things that I was at home. Or I could go to an NHS site or a hospital or a fire station. So that enables our staff to work more flexibly. The other byproduct is, that means the network, which means we pay less for it. Which is quite helpful, especially in the current climate. Yeah, and then the third byproduct of that is, the world's going more and more where we're sharing data with our partners, with the health service, with the police, with fire. We can put all those people in the same room, but not have separate networks anymore. We can all use the same network, which will make it easier to work together and easier to put teams together that are multi-agency. So as you can see, all of these things unlock a future where things are very different, and actually there'll be more things around the data as well. But for now, for this discussion, actually it's going to make a big difference, and already is.
Yeah, Stacey, is it something you're familiar with and that you're working with your London councils?
Yeah, I mean, we're doing some work. There's a programme being run separately on the back of that, and they work a lot with the sensor work and everything, but I'm not heavily involved in it. But I know there is some really, really good work with Hitachi and Microsoft going on, and the digital inclusion piece. So again, just all the stuff that you were talking about, Kurt, there's just lots going on. But yeah, that's my colleague that runs with that one.
Yeah, and some exciting stuff going on too. I know, Kurt, you've been passionate about digital innovation for decades, so it's nothing new to you, but it's lovely to have you both on the panel. And we have lost Cam. He kind of froze and then dropped off, which I did earlier in the middle of a debate, which wasn't great. But so we thank Cam. Hopefully he's listening somewhere. And also a massive thank you to you, Kurt, and Stacey for joining the panel quite late on in the day. It was lovely to hear from both of you, and Cam too. So thank you very much. It is time now for another keynote. Sarah Einon is the digital infrastructure for Scottish Futures Trust. Sarah leads a team of industry and commercial specialists who support the development and delivery of digital infrastructure strategies covering international connectivity, data centres, fibre broadband and advanced wireless infrastructure. So Sarah, welcome to our virtual stage.
Thank you very much, Helen, and thank you for having me today at the event. My name is Sarah Einan. Helen, you were correct in your first pronunciation, so kudos for that. And I'm the Programme Director for Digital Infrastructure at Scottish Futures Trust. We've been in existence for 12 years now, and we're established by the Scottish Government as a centre of infrastructure expertise to provide an active leadership role across major infrastructure programmes. We do this by bringing our unique mix of skills, experience, resource and knowledge to deliver improved outcomes for Scotland's public sector infrastructure. I'm going to pick up on a matter about better utilisation of data, as was discussed by the panel earlier this morning. But I'm also going to pick up on better connectivity, which was covered by the preceding panel, and it was really great to hear about the importance of better connectivity by some of the panelists there. Firstly, I'd like to kick things off with exploring a transformation and what we consider as valuable outcomes for our strategies and programmes. Next slide, please. Most business cases work on the basis that to grow the economy, and even Scotland, we must focus purely on the financial benefits of activity. However, the economy is more than a means to an end. It is more than GDP. The economic system should be a service that prioritises the collective well-being of the current and future generations within environmental limits, an economy of well-being. Next slide, please. The phrase shown here to describe the well-being economy has been developed by the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, which is a forum for 37 governments that have come together to collaborate to develop policy standards to promote sustainable economic growth. The key is building in from the start all of these goals: growth, inclusivity, and sustainability from the start and not as a retrofit. Next slide, please. Increased well-being is not a new approach. It is at the heart of the Scottish Government National Performance Framework, as introduced in 2007. It acts as a guide for Scottish Government's national well-being with the aim of getting everyone in Scotland to work together. It uses 11 national outcomes and a set of values of kindness, dignity, and compassion. The National Performance Framework now sits as the vision for the National Strategy for Economic Transformation, published earlier this year, which is driving the transformation of the Scottish economy over the next 10 years. We now therefore have a direct link between well-being and the economy. This requires us to rethink what we consider as capital assets. As supported by the Infrastructure Commission for Scotland's report in 2020, there is transformational benefit in recognising and utilising a wide range of assets beyond the standard capital assets and economic assets that we currently do in order to achieve the holistic outcomes that we are seeking. Now, this may all sound very high level, but how do we do this in our own strategies and policies and programmes? We need to ask ourselves and check that we are addressing all three of these well-being pillars and not just one or two. The well-being pillars being inclusion, growth, and sustainability. If we're not considering these, then we need to recognise this and realise that we're not supporting a well-being economy from the conception of our activities, and any adjustment to fix this at a later date might be costly or just too late. I would now like to show you an example of this three-pillar transformational approach in the mobile telecom sector. Next slide, please. Infralink is a national initiative that is focusing on the ways in which the public sector and the mobile industry can engage better to improve mobile deployment across Scotland. We are bringing together those that value connectivity with the mobile operators who deliver it. To date, the mobile industry has viewed engagement with the public sector as something to be avoided, sadly, due to its complexity and in some cases lack of understanding and engagement. But as major asset owners, planning authorities and potential users of mobile connectivity, it is no longer possible that the mobile sector can avoid local authorities and the public sector in general. With the introduction of 5G small cells that rely on local authority street assets, including lights, traffic systems and bus shelters, local authorities are critical in helping to develop better connectivity and a more digitised Scotland. Infrelink is here to make the public sector's engagement with mobile operators less fraught, more efficient, and ultimately more productive, using healthy engagement to build long-lasting relationships and promote investment and growth on the back of excellent nationwide connectivity. Infrelink is funded by the Scottish Government and delivered by Scottish Features Trust. Using in-house industry and public sector expertise, best practice, and a lot of engagement with stakeholders, Infrelink has looked at the bigger operational deployment picture and provided a credible approach that works for Scotland as a whole to improve the transactional process and make Scotland's local authorities an attractive partner to work with. Next slide, please. Infrelink's tools have been created for land, buildings, and street assets and take account of the differing requirements of rural and urban areas. Instead of industry avoiding the public sector and the public sector potentially believing that connectivity will improve of its own accord, Infrelink presents tools that are proactive and a balanced starting point for negotiations, improving the current way of working by making the process more efficient, deployment quicker and cheaper. They're not intended to be the end result, but a way to get there quicker using best practice and engagement. As an example of things that can block this engagement, there are some local authorities that still have policies and processes that are over 20 years old, and because of 3G and concerns about 3G at the time, prohibit the use of their assets to put mobile infrastructure on their land or buildings. So when I talk about, I suppose, a lack of engagement or a lack of understanding, that's the kind of backdrop that some of these engagements and conversations are facing. We've started to make some inroads in this space by publishing our leases for land and buildings, and also our master agreements for small cells. They're on our website, the details of which you'll see at the end of this presentation. And as I say, that's a starting point for discussion, which takes account of legislation in relation to electronic communication codes, and also certain local authority requirements about getting best consideration for their assets. We've also published a payment guidance, which is a methodology for how to consider the financial aspects of engaging regarding land and buildings and small cells on street furniture. And again, that's published on our website and available for use with guidance. One of the specific tools that we've developed recently is a process and product for showcasing the assets owned by local authorities and the terms in which they can be used. Next slide, please. The UK government commenced in March this year the funding of 8 projects across the UK to reconsider how mobile telecom solutions are progressing with public sector asset owners and the mobile industry. This is with the aim of addressing known challenges for 4G and 5G macro infrastructure, but anticipating the volume assets needed to support the rollout of 5G small cells. The SFT project, named Infrelink Exchange, is the only project in Scotland and builds upon the investment already made in Scotland by the Scottish Government. Since our discovery phase back in 2020, we have looked at the challenges through the lens of how can we deliver an output that is national, sustainable, and can be replicated across other local authorities and regions. Working with the Tay Cities region, so Angus, Dundee, Fife and Perth and Kinross, who are the asset owners, Saitena as the platform provider, and utilising existing public sector funded organisations and their work, namely the Improvement Service and the Local Government Digital Office, we are delivering a pilot project that has outcomes that address the 3 pillars, and so contributing to the growth of the wellbeing economy. Next slide, please. We are doing this by transforming the way that the parties engage by repurposing data relating to over 140,000 assets and also planning restriction data that is already held and managed by the Improvement Service, currently for all 32 local authorities. It is a practical example of how the data that organisations produce can generate impact beyond their original use. By going through the Improvement Service and utilising what they already produce, the data is quality assured and uses pre-standardised data schemas that save time and removes the need to harmonise multiple local authority datasets. Coupled with the leases and payment guidance that Infolink has produced, as I mentioned earlier, the user is guided through the process for siting and operating mobile network equipment so that this becomes easier and faster, ensuring Scotland has the best digital connectivity for its diverse communities. Next slide, please. The platform creates consistency across the region and creating a level playing field for investment opportunities. It is a systematic approach that does not rely on existing relationships to drive projects. In effect, it is more streamlined and efficient. Given this is not an automated process, but still requires engagement, it open lines of communication and promotes engagement. All of this makes the local authorities in the region easier to do business with, encouraging further investment to improve connectivity for all, removing the digital divide. Feedback from local authorities is that it's been a driver for change and provided momentum to evolve siloed and aged processes. The platform and the Infolink approach will help achieve the outcomes quicker in a more collaborative way, with local authorities playing a more active role in the process. Hopefully this slide gives you a feel for how the data is represented, but also starts to show you and help you consider how the asset data collated for Infolink could be beneficial for use cases beyond mobile connectivity, such as Internet of Things infrastructure deployment, electrical vehicle charging, site planning, smart cities, and drone superhighways. Using the data for the T-cities, we now have a platform that is live and is accessible by contracted industry parties. We continue to work with the local authorities to ensure that internal policies and processes match those proactive approaches for mobile connectivity. But to ensure this evolution of the approach to mobile telecoms remains, we need to monitor the response from industry to ensure that the proactivity that local authorities have actually put in place is being positively responded to by industry. And when we start to see that, and we start to see industry engagement with the platform and with the local authorities, that is when things start to become reality, and we will be delivering on the back of those well-being economy goals. Next slide, please. So to finish up, I would encourage you to keep the 3 pillars, inclusivity, growth, and sustainability, in your transformation considerations. There is the opportunity to converge the aims of organisations, of individual organisations with national goals to ensure that we are doing activities that have a lasting positive effect. I hope that the other thing you take away from my presentation today is that transformation can come from utilising what we already have in place. It may be used for a different purpose and supported by a new approach, but we all have a great deal of assets that have already been created and already funded and are being maintained that can be reused for new projects and activities. Thanks for inviting me today, and enjoy the rest of the conference. And I know at this point also, very importantly, your lunch. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sarah, for making time to be with us and share all of that. It was really insightful, and you've definitely left us a lot to think about. So thank you. Your time is much appreciated. We're going to take a break now, as Sarah alluded to, and come back at 2 o'clock for our next panel discussion, Cloud and Multi-Cloud Approach. I hope you're still scoring points with our gamification tool. Those in first, second and third places can donate to the charity More Trees. And if you jump into the meeting hub, you're building connections with delegates, not only for this event, but also with those who sign up for future events too. So enjoy lunch. I'll see you back here at 2 o'clock.